the Board of Selectmen meeting. It is June 12, 2017. The purpose of our only item on the agenda is we are reviewing candidates for the town manager position. We are waiting for the one of the recruiting firm, MRI. Unfortunately, there was a bad accident on Route 495, and they've been en route since 8:30. So we expect them here shortly. They just called and said they will be here by 10:30, hopefully. We have 3 candidates to interview today. These 3 candidates are a result of a large pool of candidates being screened by the screening committee, who met last Saturday and did their final evaluations and brought the recommendation of these 3 persons to the board's attention. These 3 individuals, as I say, have all been vetted through the process, and they are the result of, I believe, almost 77 candidates. Our intent is through process today. We have questions we will be asking that are consistent of all candidates, and those questions we have allowed up to an hour per candidate, and if we feel necessary, there's always another option to extend further. Once we complete this, we will be in open session. We have by law, we have to do all this in open session, but we will have the opportunity to debate to some extent to the candidates and our opinions and how we rated them as for their interviewing and their performance. Beyond that, the board is scheduled for next Wednesday to meet in executive session to negotiate terms. Thereby, once the terms are negotiated, we can make an offer with consistent working with MRI, the recruiting firm, to the candidate. At that point, the candidate has the opportunity to respond and say, yes, I accept the offer, or no, I don't. If they accept the offer, then we go into further negotiation with the candidate to finalize the position. At this time, as I say, these candidates have been through a number of interviews. They've conducted essay questions. There have been evaluations. The board received this information on Saturday, so we have been totally removed to the process until this weekend, where the 3 of us have spent evaluating not only the resumes, but the responses given by candidates to the essay questions and their backgrounds. MRI went further, and they have also given us an evaluation as to previous applications, what positions they took, whether they refused the position. We have all the history behind that as well. So I feel very comfortable that they've done a very good job, the screening committee and the recruiting firm, of screening these candidates down to this point. So as I say, the intent was MRI was going to be here at 10 o'clock to start the process of going over with the board how we should proceed. It's pretty standard. The law requires that we do this in open session and that all candidates are treated with respect. There's no disparaging remarks made. There's no insinuations made to any candidate. We stay on a positive note so that we do not in any way slight or offend a candidate. At this time, we have questions. There are 17 questions, which is a composite of questions that were drawn up by the present town manager as well as members of the Board of Selectmen. And I would like to ask the board members with no special sequence, but I would like to start with Gary, Steve, then me, and keep repeating that process through the questions. So it'll be Gary, Steve, Bob, Gary, Steve, Bob, and that way we'll stay in sequence. And of the 17 questions, you 2 will ask the majority, and I will have 1 less question to ask. Is that satisfactory with each?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Gary? I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob, in a second.
Do you want to talk about the posting?
Huh?
About Wednesday, about the posting, why we can't vote?
We are posted, clearly put, we are posted on Wednesday. There was a minor technicality, but to stay within the law, we felt it best to repost again Wednesday to stay consistent. Not that anybody would challenge it, but never leave it open to any challenge or interpretation. So we are posted Wednesday at noontime, and this board will meet again. We like this town hall. We're here a lot, it seems. So other than that, we have 1 item on our agenda that we need to deal with, and that's respective to 3 Milford Street. We have to take action. I'll turn that over to the town manager for that. You have any questions, Steve, at this point?
I do not.
Okay. Bob?
Thank you. Yes, I think this would be new business. We move forward with the RFQ for the study of 3 Milford Street. The due date for proposals is Thursday. as part of the agreement that the board has with the property owner, and this was discussed prior to town meeting, if not during town meeting, there'll be a deposit, non-refundable deposit to the property owner. If the town, it was agreed if the town goes forward to purchase the property, this will be applied to the purchase price. So I would ask the board to approve the deposit of $5,000 from the Racine Trust.
And to be clear, that would be the William Knowlton Trust?
Knowlton Trust,
That's
sorry.
right. Yep.
Get my
Okay.
trust mixed up.
The board, any questions?
That would be in addition to the study, the money that's being appropriated for the study.
Correct.
Gary, any questions?
No, sir.
Steve, any questions?
No questions.
I'd accept a motion from the William Knowlton Trust.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we take $5,000 from the William Knowlton Trust for 3 Milford Street.
Second the motion.
Unanimous action of the board, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you want to add about this process? I know you have, along with MRI, structured a lot of this.
Only that I've been to several meetings of the search committee. I was at their meeting Thursday. I was with them and MRI when they went into executive session, and I would only say that I've worked with a lot of search committees. I thought they did an excellent job, very conscientious, very thorough. They took the job very seriously, and I think you have ended up with 3 good candidates, very good candidates.
Okay. Just to identify the candidates before they come in, and they're coming in no specific order. It's just like random. And so, again, we're staying as objective as possible. The first candidate is Thomas Gregory. The second candidate is Patrice Garvin. And the third candidate, and I don't want to misspell the name, that's why I want to make sure I get it right, is Derek Brindisi, I would pronounce it. So those 3 candidates, again, as we interview, you will have, those listening will have exposure to their backgrounds and to their previous experiences that will come up through these questions. At that time, if we don't have anything further to discuss, I ask the board to take a recess for another 15 minutes until MRI arrives, and the candidates will be here at 10:30. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Great.
The board's in recess until 10:25. Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Tom Gregory.
Gary Darden.
Nice to meet you.
Gary Plumbing. Nice to meet
Tom
you.
Gregory, good to meet you.
Hi, Tom. Steve Natalia.
Hi, Steve.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
Once again.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Please take a seat. You have the comfortable chair. We replaced the stiff chair so you'd be more relaxed.
Very good.
Obviously, our intent is to get to know you, so we want this to be a very relaxed and open format. Just to explain our process, you've been through quite an extensive round of interviews with the screening committee and the recruiting firm. And our intent is here, we have questions which are identical for all candidates. We may do some follow-ups, but they're quite consistent.
Okay.
And they're to give us a background or a general idea as to your qualifications. So, do you have anything you'd like to say before we start? Any?
Sure, I give some opening comments. First, let me just tell you, express my gratitude for being here today. I'm happy to be here, excited about this opportunity. I'm a Central Mass guy. I live in Worcester with my wife and 3-year-old daughter. I went to college and graduate school in Worcester. I left a teaching career in 2005 with a real desire to get into local government, public policy, public administration. I took a job with an entry-level job with the City of Worcester, managing some federal community development block grant programs, home affordable funding programs. I was there for, actually for 4 years. In 2009, I was appointed by then City Manager Michael O'Brien to lead a regional homelessness initiative, which was funded largely through stimulus dollars. So I had a tremendous opportunity to get out there in the public, do some consensus building, a coalition building around a very challenging public policy issue. I got an extensive experience managing grants. That was in the City of Worcester, was my first real foray into grant writing, grant management. And then the position with the town of Shrewsbury opened up, a support position to the town manager, assistant to the town manager. I worked for Daniel Morgado, long-time town manager there. He was a terrific mentor to me, and I provided support to him through the whole range of municipal services, through budget preparation, collective bargaining, personnel, procurement, And then the position in Walpole was a nice next step for me. I took on some real oversight of some core functions of government, procurement, insurance, continued to help with budget development. I took on some statutory responsibility that I didn't have in Shrewsbury. I'm just excited about this opportunity. I'm ready to take that next step in my career. I feel like I have those technical skills and those other soft skills that I can bring to this position.
Okay, well, great. I'll turn it over to Gary. He'll start with the questions, and at any time you
Great.
want to extrapolate or go further, feel free.
Ready, sir? We are sure that you did a great deal of research as a candidate for this position. Please give us your impression of Upton. Tell us why you are a good fit for this community, and what will you bring to this town that may be lacking.
Okay. So I know that Upton prides itself on its rural environment, the charm, the character of a rural New England town, small town. And I know that there's been challenges, financial challenges as well. Growing, diversifying the commercial tax base has been a real challenge. Living within the world of federal and state mandates has been a challenge. I know that the town in 2015, I think it was, passed an override for $1.4 million override to support the regional school district. And I know that Upton struggles to stay within the confines of the Proposition 2.5 limitations that most small towns have to struggle with. I know that in spite of that, the town has made some significant investments. This building is a striking example of that. I know that that there's some desire to do some public building in the future. I know there's an interest in building a new library that may be a mix of a library's COA center. A DPW facility expansion has been discussed. And I know that there's some funding, debt capacity that's going to be realized in the next few years to be able to possibly launch those programs or those building programs. What I have for skills to bring to this position, in addition to the technical skills that I've gained, which I'm happy to talk about in detail, I feel confident I have those soft skills, the right demeanor, the right attitude to bring to this position. I'm a great communicator. I'm a great writer. I love to write. I love to make presentations. I love meeting with small groups, large groups. As I said in an earlier round of interviews, I think it's incumbent upon the town manager in Upton, or the next town manager, to be a visible face in the public. I believe that position is key to getting folks engaged, energized, informed about the initiatives that the selectmen want to move forward. And I'm ready to do that, and I'm ready to have a real comfort level doing that. So again, I feel like I have those technical skills and the right skills around coalition building and consensus building. Being a facilitator, those are some of the adjectives I need to describe my leadership style. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Okay. Thomas, what are your personal core values? How were these instilled in you, and how have these influenced your work ethic and how you approach your responsibilities?
I would say at the very top of that list is respect. And I think these are values that reach beyond just local government. I think showing people the respect that you want to be given on a daily basis is just critical to this job, critical to local government, critical to effective local government. Being respectful, especially in the climate that we live in right now, and being honest and transparent. I've tried to be direct with people in my interactions with employees, with boards and committees, with other staff, municipal staff. They always know where they stand with me. I feel like I've been respectful and direct in interactions. So those I would say are my core qualities, characteristics.
Okay?
Okay.
How's that? Could you describe your relationship between town manager and the chair of a board of selectmen?
In my current job?
How you would perceive it, what it is? Yeah.
Yeah, my perception of this position here in Upton as a town manager is a facilitator. Board of Selectmen sets the policy for the town. Town manager enacts that policy and keeps the citizens informed and helps to carry the torch, particularly for challenging projects that need a cheerleader. That's been especially the case for me in Walpole. Very, very active citizenry, very intense discussions, and it's administration's role, and it's been my role specifically, to be the cheerleader for certain projects. And I see that very much in this position. Working in concert with the Board of Selectmen, carrying out their agenda, and making sure that the box that's local government is followed, the rules and regulations are maintained through the whole process. I feel comfortable doing that. I feel comfortable making sure that laws are followed, around procurement or personnel or collective bargaining. So that's what I see that is the core role for the town manager here in Upton.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
This next question is kind of like a 2 or 3 part one. You want me to read it all at one time, or you
Sure,
want to
that's
do one at a time? Okay. One morning, the chair calls you and directs you to handle an issue differently from which the board voted. What do you do? The chair tells you that he speaks for other members of the board. Also, what do you do? This is a matter that was discussed in an executive session, and a reliable source tells you that the selectmen have been discussing the matters with others.
Okay,
So basically, the chair calls you and wants you to handle it differently than the way the board voted.
Okay, so the issue there, there's an issue, there's a problem with that, because the Board of Selectmen can have different opinions, but I need to follow the direction of the board. And if I follow, if I take an order that, it just puts the manager in a very difficult spot if there isn't consensus around whatever issue is being discussed. I would want to have some deliberation, some discussion around what the issue is, to be able to, before I would carry out a request for an order that didn't have full support of the board. The second part of the question, was it?
So the second part is the chair tells you that has spoke to the other members of the board, and like, one other member, and that other member is in agreement.
Is in agreement?
Yes, sir.
But the third member is not?
Right.
Okay, well, it's, again, it's a difficult situation to be in for a town manager. I'd want to speak individually to the third member directly to get his opinion. And I'd try to facilitate the outcome, being mindful of the open meeting law, any violations around that. And then there was a third part, the executive session.
Yes, you, from a reliable source, you find out that the selectmen are discussing these matters outside or with others.
In a quorum? With
Basically saying the board is in executive session, we discuss something in confidence, then after that, go out to the general public and restate what was discussed. And the nature of the executive session, they're a foreign violation of open meeting law.
Well, there's a violation there.
Yeah.
So there's a clear violation there that can't be missed, cannot be addressed. Again, it's those technical skills, advising the board about what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do. I feel confident in my ability to do that. I know the laws. I know the laws around executive session. I know the laws around conducting an open meeting comfortably. And it would be my goal to, my imperative to inform the board, remind the board of their responsibilities as it relates to the law.
Okay. Upton has excellent department heads. Describe the town manager's role and relationship with department heads. How would you establish a leadership position? And how would you promote communication and teamwork within and across departments?
Good. The town manager is required to be a facilitator. You've got to be able to earn the respect of your team, earn the respect of your department heads. They carry out the day-to-day business of government. Communication between the town manager and the department heads must be consistent, must be routine. There must be good dialogue. My role as a town manager would to be a facilitator and to make sure that, to the degree as possible, silos don't form in government, where we have a turf and territory among the various department heads. You know, I'll do this, but I'm not going to do this, sort of thing. And I've been, in my experiences in Walpole and in Shrewsbury, particularly in Shrewsbury, I've been fortunate to see effective facilitation between the town manager and department heads. And I would do that in an honest and respectful way. I'd have routine meetings with department heads, weekly meetings or monthly meetings, which gives them a chance to express to the whole group what they're doing. But it also gives me a chance to communicate to them what the selectmen's priorities are at that given time. So,
I guess a quick follow-up then. And how would you be able to keep them within budget?
you have to be able to say no. So the question came up in a previous, in the screening committee, can you say no? And of course, I think if you can't say no, you can't be in this job, because the town has a budget, and appropriations are fixed dollar amounts that need to be met throughout the course of the year. And it's my job as a town manager to make sure that that's the case. That the various cost centers in government are operating within the limitations of the appropriations that are made at town meeting. And it's important to realize, it's important to have the department heads realize that it's razor's edge. You know, that's the reality of local government in Massachusetts, that there's nothing extra. And being able to communicate that is something I feel like I can do well. And being able to say no is something that I feel confident being able to do.
Okay. These are all hypothetical. This does not infer or imply anybody in the town of Upton. You're awakened at 2 a.m. by a call from a close friend who's been involved in a one-car accident on their way home from an office party. The accident's in Upton. He or she admits she may have had celebrated a bit too much. They were alone, are uninjured, and the only damage is to their personal automobile. They are clearly frightened and upset and want your help. What will you do, and why?
Okay, is the friend a coworker?
It's a close friend.
Close friend. Being a leader in local government, whether it's a town manager, a selectman, member of the selectmen, anyone representing the town in a public way, there's a certain code of ethics that you've got to follow, and it's, in my view, non-negotiable. If it appeared to me, if I showed up on the scene, and it appeared to me that the person was intoxicated, I'd call the police. I'd bring the police in. If there's damage to property or another automobile, you need to report it. I have lived my professional life upholding a very strict code of ethics, and it's just fundamental to this job. It's fundamental to being a town manager. And I see no room for exceptions.
All right, thank you. Gary?
Ready, sir? An employee has a family member with a serious health issue and is the main caregiver. This employee has used up nearly all of his personal sick time and will not take FMLA because he or she is the sole breadwinner. Now this employee is showing up late and sometimes not at all. How would you handle this?
Okay, I bring the employee in one-on-one and have a conversation. And it sounds like if it were at that point, that those conversations probably have already been had, and that there's a paper trail. I would have documented all of my interactions with this employee. And that question kind of goes back to the previous question about doing the right thing. Personnel administration is, in my mind, perhaps the most challenging aspect of government and I think organizational culture. If you make exceptions with personnel, you set yourself up for future problems. I've watched it, I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in my current job with other, with the administrator in my current job. It's tempting to make concessions and exceptions, but consistency has to be followed. FMLA, the employee probably knows the length of time, won't take it, well then you have to move that person along. Again, not making exceptions.
All set? Steve?
An employee of the, whichever department, has come to your office on her day off and reports to you that she feels she's being harassed and her superiors are doing nothing about it. How would you handle this?
I would have a conversation first with the employee, the aggrieved employee. I'd bring that person in. I'd take written notes of his or her allegations of harassment, very serious allegation to be made. I would then, at a separate time, I'd bring in the other party and interview the other party to see what the facts are from that other party's perspective. And then a decision has to be made because harassment can very quickly move into litigation. Claim can be made to the Massachusetts Commission Against Disability, and taking notes, copious notes, to document the exchanges between the two employees would lead me in the direction of, yes, this needs this needs some discipline, written discipline, perhaps. If it's egregious, suspension would be the option. I'd work with town council to make sure that I'm following the proper path. And it's not something to be taken lightly, harassment in the workplace.
What are the top 3 challenges facing municipal officials today, would you say?
I would say number one, the financial constraints around Proposition 2.5 limitations, as I mentioned earlier. The mandates, the ever-increasing list of mandates that are being issued at the state and federal government creates a real problem for municipalities to meet their costs, the fixed costs especially, that rise so dramatically. And then the climate. I would say today, the lack of civility, particularly right now, is very, very challenging. I think people sometimes like to make government appear to be the root of all problems. It's convenient for people, especially the people who are disgruntled and are looking for a place to sort of hang their disappointments or their issues. I think that is very, very challenging right now for public officials. And I think it's challenging for a town manager to be able to stand up publicly and earn people's respect. Because I think you have, in any town, I think you have a group of informed citizens who are generally supportive, may disagree, but are generally supportive in the role of government. But then you have the other group, as I said, the other group of people that may be apathetic, but some of them are angry about decisions that government's made. And the role of the town manager in this challenging environment is to stand up, have that credibility, have that respect, to try to not sway people, but to show people that government can be effective, that the process can be transparent and effective. So I'd say the financial constraints, the climate of civility and dialogue in the discourse, public discourse. And then the personnel, I guess number 3 would be the personnel administration. Very, very challenging.
Okay, so the follow-up to that be, what actions would you take to address these issues, effectively prepare to face them?
Effectively, I'm
If
sorry.
you were selected to be town manager in Upton, how would you address these and prepare to face these issues, which you've just cited here?
Okay. On the financial side, I know that Upton has done a terrific job along regionalization. You've regionalized your public health, nursing, your conservation agent, your E911 services. I would look to continue to find efforts to regionalize and save money. Find those economies of scale working with other towns. That was sort of rule number 1 in Shrewsbury, and also in Walpole, looking for ways to streamline services. 2, you've got to be able to develop a budget that's reasonable and exists within the limitations of the Proposition 2.5 constraints. And that means asking departments to do more with less. That may sound cliche, but that's really at the heart of it. Delivering services in the most efficient and effective way every day, knowing that the pot of money is only so big. On the financial side as well, I'd try to take an active voice in collaboration with the Selectmen to be out visible, advocating for legislation to reduce mandates for local government. That's something I would feel comfortable doing, whether those open forums, regionalization, forums around regionalization, meeting with legislators. I'd ask for the Selectmen's blessing to be able to represent the town in that regard. 2, on the civility side, I would conduct myself in an open and transparent manner. I have no agenda. I've had no agenda in Shrewsbury. I've had no agenda in Walpole. I would make my office accessible. I'd be welcoming to folks. I would be a respectful face of local government in the community. And as I said during the screening committee, I'd try to really be out there in the community as a visible presence. Based on my research in Upton, it appears to me that there's a real need for that. Again, not stepping on the toes of selectmen, but carrying out their agenda in a visible way, meeting with people out in the community. I feel comfortable doing that. I feel comfortable making presentations, as I said, speaking with small groups, larger groups. And then on the personnel side, I can tell you that I'm an active member of the Massachusetts Personnel Administrators Association, as I've been since 2011. The key is keeping yourself educated on the laws and what's changing on the personnel side, keeping up to speed with the changes, reaching out to other administrators, managers on advice. How have you handled this matter, that matter? It's staying informed on the personnel administration side is what's key.
Okay. Gary?
Sir, how will you keep yourself informed of the activities of your department heads, and how would you help promote a positive work environment for them?
How would I keep myself informed of?
Of your, like their job performance of the department heads and how they're performing?
Oh, I would have day-to-day interaction with department heads. So I would have a very direct sense of their performance, interacting with them every day. I've worked in 2 towns. One town had performance evaluations, the other one didn't. And surprisingly, the town that didn't have performance evaluations seemed to have a better, perhaps a little bit of a better collegiality, and then subsequently good performance. So I'd stay on my department heads. I'd make sure that I'm engaged with them. If I would consider written evaluations, if that's what the Board of Selectmen wishes me to do. But I would be vocal with them. I'd like to be in departments, in the various offices, rather than often stuck sort of behind my desk. So I have a very good handle of the performance of my department heads.
Steve?
Please describe the most difficult employee matter you have experienced. What made this difficult for you? And looking back, should you have handled it differently?
In one of the towns I worked in, I was asked to step in to be the acting department head because there was a medical, the veteran department head had a medical issue, was on medical leave. I was asked to step in to manage that department in her absence. And very quickly, I learned that this department head had certain deals made with her employees that were just not good for the organization or for the department, and I had to say no. I'm trying to be vague without giving the details of the matter, but I had to be able to say no to some of these demands that were being placed on me because the employees thought I would just carry out these sort of inside deals that were made with this department head, and that was very, very hard. I was the bad guy. I was coming in. I was coming in with my own sense of what's right and wrong and what's right for the department, and it was being challenged by these employees in the department. And I don't know if I'd do anything different. It was very hard for me because they didn't like that I was there. They didn't respect me, but I had to do what I thought was right for the department and for the organization. There was issues around, some issues around work hours, that were some of the issues, and I had to be firm about consistency.
Yes.
Yeah. Please describe what you believe the town manager's role is in the community, and I'd like to narrow it down to specifically about how you'd establish communication links to the community and what's your view of customer service.
Well, I would say customer service is what local government does. That's at the top of the list, providing services to the residents every day, on good days, bad days. That's what we do. The role of the town manager, as far as communication, is getting the word out to residents about what the priorities of the selectmen are. And that can have that can take a number of different shapes. I think weekly memos can be okay for the folks that are informed and engaged, but there's got to be other ways to get the word out to folks in the town, and that could be again meeting with small groups, meeting out in the community. In Shrewsbury, the town manager had a Ask the Manager TV show where he had residents come in. They were board members, committee members, residents would come in. It was a once every 2 weeks TV show, and he would answer their questions about what's going on in the community. And that's another way to get the word out about what's happening in Upton, what the priorities are of the selectmen, and that's an example of something that I would be comfortable doing. So again, it's just being a very visible face in the community.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Describe the approach you would take to address the desires of members of this community to keep it like it is, as well as those in the community who want to see new ideas, innovations, business which change the nature of this community, but expand the tax base. What steps would you take to address all the needs efficiently and in the best interest of this town?
That's in my research, that's been a recurring theme. How do you grow the tax base, expand the tax base, commercial tax base, and at the same time retain the character of the town, the charm of the town? There are ways to do that. I would look to link up with the 495 Metro West Corridor Partnership, if that linkage hasn't already been made. I've been involved with that group before. They've got some great success on legislative advocacy. I'd bring a representation of Upton's representation to that group. And then I think you need to look for opportunities for growth that are low impact, sustainable development opportunities. An example of that I can give you, I have direct experience with that in Shrewsbury. When I was in Shrewsbury has a municipal ash landfill, a big piece of which has been closed. And I was able to help procure a solar farm on this municipally exempt land. And I wrote the specification, put it out to bid, brought it before town meeting, and it was successful. It was a revenue stream of about $3.2 million when you combine the lease payment, the pilot payment, and the money savings buying the electricity behind the meter. Shrewsbury has a municipal electric company. So that's a good example of low impact development that can turn a revenue stream for the town, and that doesn't have a dramatically negative visible impact. I think so. The key is, as is articulated in the town's master plan, finding development that in scale and appearance is appropriate, and that's an example of one kind of development that I'd look to do.
Just follow up. Do you think the lack of infrastructure in Upton would hinder you at all?
That's a challenge. Yeah, so that's going to be a challenge. The first question I think you have to ask around economic development is two questions. One, how are you providing services to your existing commercial tax-based entities? And two, what capacity do you have to grow that sector? I know that Upton has made some investments in infrastructure. You have a third municipal water source recently installed. You're making improvements, partly funded through the TIP, to the Hartford Avenue segment here in town. So that has to keep happening. You can't let, you have to stay on top of infrastructure improvement. Inflow and infiltration on the sewer side is another big mandate that you've got to spend a lot of money to satisfy. So again, that's critical, having those conversations about infrastructure. What can Upton provide? What kind of capacity does Upton have to attract new entities?
Steve?
Describe your experience advocating for a municipality at the regional, state, and federal levels, and how that experience might be used in Upton to address major issues that may be facing the community in the next few years.
Hey, when I was in Shrewsbury, the town manager, in partnership with the Selectmen, convened a regional task force around mandates. So the subject that keeps coming up today. It's important. I sat at that table and was able to have those conversations with other towns about what are some of these mandates and what can we do with existing resources to address these issues. One was a stormwater initiative. That was a regional initiative that the town of Shrewsbury linked up with. And again, at the state level, so there's my experience at the local level there. At the state level, when I was working in the city of Worcester, when I was appointed to lead this homelessness initiative, there was some federal stimulus dollars coming through, but there was a state match that we really had to go make the case to get. And I was the lead person doing that. I was at the State House making the case, meeting with legislators, making the case that yes, we need additional funding to make this reality happen. We were trying to close down a very problematic shelter in the downtown Worcester. So meeting with legislators at the State House, And then also, during that time, I actually traveled to Washington, D.C., because Worcester's initiative gained some attention at the federal level, because we were trying to do some real systems change around housing first, getting homeless people into housing rather than the shelter system. It was an innovative attempt, very challenging, and to change the system for homelessness. And it got some attention at the federal level, and I actually prepared some written testimony and delivered that before a committee in Washington, D.C. That was in 2010, I believe. So I can give you 3 good examples there, the local, state, and federal level.
Okay. This is rather long, but I'll try and make it as concise as possible.
Okay.
With the recent growth and popularity of blogs and the instant online dissemination of information for public discussion, basically being anonymous, that concerns less informed, more vitriolic discourse, especially around controversial issues, and becomes somewhat of a standard. And I'll elaborate just a little. We have a few websites in Upton that people can go on and blog, and again, it's anonymous. So this sometimes creates issues for lack of solid information. And tell how you've had this happen, how you've handled it, and what would be your steps to help alleviate some of that dissatisfaction.
Okay. The whole social media phenomenon right now is, in my opinion, very discouraging. It can be used well, but when you hide behind comments, as you say, it leads to, it just takes the discussion in a negative path, because you can make accusations, you can make charges, you can make comments that have no basis in reality, but because you're anonymous, you can just make those statements, and I think that can be very, very harmful for a community. I've seen it happen in all the towns I've worked in, and I think it goes back to being able to live in that environment. I think, and address that issue, I think goes back to respect and transparency. I think when the town manager has a certain respect in the community, there may be less of that kind of vitriolic discourse, and it's something that particularly fuels me right now in my job, because I deal with it almost every day, and I like to know that coming to work, I bring that civility, that discourse, that appropriate discourse to discussions, and that may bring more people in the building to get involved. But it's very, very hard.
But I want to follow up specifically, how have you addressed it when it's happened? We all understand what it is, but how would you address it? You're a town manager in Upton, a population of 8,000 people. It's a small enough community that could travel rampage through the town. So if it lacks correct basis, if it disparages someone, how do you address it?
You have to correct the record.
And how do you do that?
You do that by putting out a written statement. You can have a news conference. I have no issues doing either, because it's important that the government keeps the accurate record, and that's what you have to do. You have to put something out there written, I would say. That's my first thing. That would be my first response. And then if that's not effective, then you've got to be visible in the community, correcting the record.
Okay, thank you.
Right, sir?
Yeah.
As the new town manager, how would you evaluate the current structure, effectiveness, and efficiencies of all the town departments? How would you approach making any changes you believe necessary? How would you evaluate the teams delivering the service to the town?
Okay. again, that goes back to performance evaluation, so I'd say my first answer to those questions, having routine interaction with departments. Being in local government means that if you're not providing services accurately, you're going to hear about it from residents. So, but you don't want to get to a point where you're hearing complaints routinely about a certain service or a group of services that you're providing. So that means engaging with departments on a daily basis, having those monthly meetings, department meetings, group meetings, having the one-on-one meetings with department heads to gauge what they're doing and the effectiveness of their services. It's got to be a daily basis, take place on a daily basis. Did I answer your question? There was some multiple parts to that.
So after you evaluate it and you decide any changes, how would you go about enacting it or the changes?
You've got to give direct feedback to department heads. If there's a course of action, a change of a course of action that needs to take place, then that's got to be articulated from the town manager. If things are going well, then stay the course. But you've got to, town manager is required to give that firm feedback. And if a change has to happen, it's got to be articulated from the manager.
No, sir.
Yes.
Steve?
The town manager plays a key and active role in community development-related issues in Upton. The town wishes to expand its tax base, however, there are competing thoughts as to what type of development is desirable and how to control development in order to preserve community character. Tell us how you would help the community answer these critical questions. What approach will you take to achieve consensus? In speaking of our tax base, as in other towns, there are concerns about the size of tax bills, and at some point the town manager as the determining, if not the determining factor in the size of the tax bills. Describe the extent of the relationship between the town manager and the tax bill. And then kind of a little follow-up I'll throw out to you is, how would your experience relate to our budget, the size of our budget in relation to what you're used to working with?
Okay, there's a lot there.
A couple things there.
There's a lot there, okay. So I think as far as the community development piece, again, it goes back to being out there looking for opportunities that fit with the character of the town. I know I've said that. So, but in addition to that, you've got to be able to make linkages within the town. I know that there's an interest here in Upton to revitalize the town center. And the question then becomes, I think, in my mind, how do you link that to other parts of the community, other walking trails? How do you make housing appropriate? A review of land use may be in order. Land use regulations may be in order. I would look to enhance the economic and the development industrial committee. Give more power to that committee. And as I said, I would connect with the 495 Metro West Corridor Partnership. And I think as it relates to the tax bill question, I know that the residents in Upton are, everyone's aware of their tax bills, and I know that I would say most people in Upton are very aware of the burden, the residential burden of the tax levy. So I think any effort to increase commercial development has a direct relationship to the tax bill. And the question you asked me about my role in what was the last part of that?
Describe the extent of the relationship between the town manager and the tax bill,
Okay.
that part of it, and then I'd also ask budget size. Budget-wise, budget size. What do you see there?
Right. The tax setting process is handled by the Selectmen, and usually in November, December, the tax classification hearing. My role as a town manager would be to prepare a budget in the previous year that aligned services in the most efficient and effective manner that reduces any possible increase on the tax bill, knowing that the tax bill setting process has its own process with the selectmen. I haven't had direct experience doing that because I haven't been a town manager before. But I'm comfortable with the process. I'm comfortable with the budget development process in the fall and into the spring because I've had direct experience doing that. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes. I think the only other part, I think, I was asking you about budget size, so you're currently working within an $86 million budget?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you see that correlation between Walpole and Upton and budget size?
Okay, so a pretty dramatic difference, 86 million versus about 21 million. Just the resources are limited. That's got to be, if it's zero-based budgeting, if that's the practice here in Upton, I'd continue that. If it's not, I'd look to assemble a budget that can exist within the limitations of Proposition 2.5. It really, I mean, it comes down to limited resources to carry out the services for the town.
Okay, we've concluded the questions. Give you an opportunity to do a recap if you'd like, or if there's any further questions you'd want to ask of us at this time.
I guess my first question is, what do you see as the number one issue facing the town?
There are many, as any town. It sounds facetious, but in reality, there are many. We have a real concern from the residents as to taxation, which, let's be candid, and I am very direct. The taxpayers vote their tax rate. The Board of Selectmen doesn't set it. We set the process, but not the actual dollar amount.
Right.
And we had a recent town meeting, and we had, I'd call it a very, very low turnout. It was disappointing. And they expended $21 million, so less than 2% of the population votes our budget. Citizens don't want to hear that, but that's reality. The other thing is the typical growth problems that the community has. And I think one of the larger ones is the question that I asked relative to the outside debate on social media. Many people are uninformed because they're getting inputs that don't make sense, and they are personal agendas and personal issues, and sometimes that sets a foundation for people's beliefs in government, and that's disappointing. We have always been, at least I'll speak for myself, very, very transparent. So there should be no gray area, but it's something we deal with. So, but as far as fiscal management, I think we've done an excellent job as to our debt ratios and everything else. We're in good, our bond ratings are strong and everything follows through that. Just to give you an explanation of where we are scheduled to meet Wednesday. The board is going to go into executive session to develop a contract, but at the same time on Wednesday, we will at that time vote to determine who the candidate is we'd like to offer a position to. We will work with the firm that sits right behind you, MRI, recruiting firm, and we will be working with them to structure a program to come back to a candidate and say, here is the offering, and then we would start deliberation from there. So, we certainly appreciate your time here. It's a little warm out there today, but thank God it's here. But thank you very much for your time, and we do appreciate it. And if you have any questions, the town manager is available. You can always contact him or MRI, and we'll get you some answers through that. So.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here, and I hope you give me some consideration.
Okay, thanks very much.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thanks, sir. Nice to meet you.
Into the issues of the community. I think that follow-up is very important because, we're targeting questions to specific issues. So when he asks the question at the end, what are the issues in Upton? I think those questions are covered right through this process. So I think we've done a good job in the structure of the questions to bring out the real issues in the town of Upton. The gentleman certainly has a appreciative amount of background, and we will all interpret the process as to how we each feel. And again, as I say, we will get into further discussion after we've met with all candidates. And the gentlemen are here from the 290 incident this morning.
Fiasco.
So for the camera, you want to just sit and say hi? We have a few minutes, and introduce yourself and come on up. Gotta have the Coast Guard present.
Rescue over the weekend. You heard about it. 8 people.
There's a gentleman back there that was rescued.
Really?
No, okay, we deviate, I'm sorry, I did it.
So I apologize for being
Please
late.
introduce yourself for the
Oh, I'm
audience,
sorry.
because they don't know who you are.
I'm Alan Gould, I'm president of Municipal Resources, Inc., the firm that you hired to do this recruitment.
Yes.
And this is Bob Mercier, one of our management specialists, longtime town manager in the state of Mass.
Okay, you've seen we've gone through the first round, and we understand your dilemma this morning.
Yes.
So, but if you want to enlighten us a little about Saturday's process, we have stayed deliberately objective from this. I don't think we've communicated with you people at all, and
Correct.
nor the screening committee, and we've removed ourselves from any prejudices or biases that may have occurred, so.
Sure, and that's a great way to do it. So Saturday, we interviewed 6 candidates. I facilitated the panel with the Citizen Screening Committee, and Bob facilitated the panel of 3 of our MRI managers. So those interviews were downstairs. Your screening committee met up here. We interviewed those 6 candidates. At the end of those interviews, I went downstairs with my panel. Your committee deliberated on their own. When they had made a decision, they called us upstairs. We came up. They told us who their 3 were. Their 3 rather were the same 3 that the professional panel had picked. And I think everybody was ready for a long afternoon. It wasn't, and it went very efficiently.
Good.
So I think it was the feeling of both panels that any of the 3 that you're interviewing today can do the job. So it's a matter of fit and maybe different levels of competence. So the 3 folks you see here today should be pretty good.
Okay, and as you know, I mentioned it, I don't know if you were here, we're posted for Wednesday.
Yes.
To go in executive to work out the parameters of a contract and an offer for a position. So,
Right.
but this process seems to be working very well, so.
The only thing I'd say is that the conditional offer that we would make after you make that decision is very simple. There's no contract terms in it or anything else. It's simply conditioned upon satisfactory background investigation that's deemed by you folks, and successful negotiation of terms of a contract. The reason we do it like that is because we want to get going on that background as soon as we can, because that takes about 2 weeks to complete. During that 2 weeks, we will be finalizing with you folks and with the candidate those final terms of employment.
And if I'm not mistaken, we will withhold announcing until the screening. I mean, we can come forward and say, but we can't appoint until all the processes are complete, so.
That's
There will
correct.
be people saying, well, is that the new town manager? The reality is, not until everything is 100% emphatically completed, being background checks, terms of negotiation, and everything. So,
Right, and to us, the background is probably the most
Yeah.
important part of the hiring process.
yeah. I do comment you on the information that was provided in this material, as well as their previous history and where they've applied and reasons whether they stayed or withdrew, and so that does give further insight into who the candidate is and their past background.
Good.
Nice to have, so. Okay, is there anything else, gentlemen?
I appreciate the hyperlinks too, it makes it easy.
Appreciate what?
The links that you put in there,
Oh,
that way I
yeah,
don't have to.
yeah. We have somebody
type
that
it.
does that, and that helps us, and
Yeah.
and we check out all that stuff before we do our phone interviews. And that way, we're able to hit the candidates with those tough questions before they even make it here, so that nobody has to waste a lot of time.
Okay. Is Ms. Garvin ready?
I can get it.
Patrice is here.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. We had concerns because she also,
She was coming in behind us, and then we were thinking, oh, we should call her and give her a heads up, but we figured she was probably already on the road.
She knew the
She
back
found a
way.
workaround.
oh,
So she took exit 20,
She knew the
28, I
back-
think she
back
said.
way in, yeah.
there's a plus to begin with.
Steve, welcome.
Oh, very good, thank you.
You've been on it for a month now?
I have, yes.
These guys coaching you yet?
They're trying to, trying to.
Subjectivity.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Hello, Sarah Gardner.
Hi, how are you? Hello, how are you?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we just felt a comfortable chair would be more in order than one of those hardback chairs. Just to give you a brief overview, we have a set standardized questionnaire, and each member will take turns asking you the questions and/or any follow-ups. Our intent is to have this as open as possible so we can both get feedback both ways and get a better understanding as to who you are and we are. And our intent is at the conclusion of this, we are posted for Wednesday, and we will be going to executive session to work out terms of contract and other issues. So, but at this time, in this open format, we'll ask questions. The opportunity is for you if you want to do an introductory opening or you want to make a statement to us, please feel free.
Sure. My name is Patrice Garvin, for those people watching at home. I'm currently the town administrator in the town of Shirley. I've been there for a little over 3.5 years. It'll be 4 years in October. Shirley is a very small town, about 5,300 people. So as you can imagine, in a small town, I wear many hats. I do a lot of different things in my position due to the fact that having the resources we have in Shirley makes it harder to have a larger staff to rely on. In my time that I've been in Shirley, I've been able to really turn the budget around. And I've done that through consolidations of positions. I've done that through building up the reserves. When I first arrived in Shirley, the reserves in the town of Shirley were somewhere around $300,000 in our stabilization and capital stabilization fund. My philosophy is where the bond rating goes, so does the town. If the bond rating increases, obviously your financial projection is increasing. So now the combined reserves are $1.5 million. I've been able to build reserves. I've been able to balance the budget. I've been able to put money towards capital, which was not being done prior to my arrival. We have been able to literally just redo town hall from the inside out. Some of the offices had been neglected for a long period of time. I came in, I rearranged some of the offices to make it more friendly to the residents that were coming into the town hall. Some of the spaces were very open. It looked like we were closed for business. My objective was to make it look friendlier, more professional, and more amenable to the residents that were coming in. And since I've been there, we've been running really well, and it's been quite an adventure.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, we're going to start, and it's sequential, as you might imagine. So I'll let Gary start the first question, and feel free to ad lib to the question or follow up on it as you wish.
You all set, sir?
He calls me sir.
He gets on.
Okay.
You all set? We are sure you did a great deal of research as a candidate for this position. Please give us your impression of Upton and tell us why you would be a good fit for this community and what will you bring that this town is lacking.
So Upton, what I've seen in Upton is Upton has a vision. It seems to know where it wants to go. I believe that I will be the person to bring you there. I think when you're working in town government, a lot of people have different visions and where they think they need to go, and sometimes it's the right person to get you there. You need the right people in place. I've seen that you have a lot of infrastructure. You have a very aggressive capital plan, very heavily on the DPW side. I see that, and I really would love the opportunity to work with the DPW director that you currently have. I think Upton is a place similar to Shirley, small town, predominantly residential, small commercial growth. I can use some of the things that I've done in Shirley to try and stimulate that growth in Upton. I truly take on the community that I work in. I care about the people that live in the community I work in, to the extent that if someone comes to me with a problem, even if it's outside of my wheelhouse, I will try and do everything I can to make sure that resident is taken care of. For example, a town clerk about a year ago called me and said there was a resident that was going to be evicted from her home. And I didn't leave my office that night until I knew she was connected to somebody that could help her. I felt that the clerk was calling me because she knew that I could help this resident. And that is what I do. I'm here to serve the residents of the town. and I take that seriously. I work collectively with the board. There is not one thing one of you would know that the other two don't. Would never surprise you. I would always make sure you're informed. That is what I feel my role is as a town manager. I want to make sure that we're working collectively to better the residents' experience and life in town. That is the goal.
Thank you.
What are your personal core values? How were this installed in you, and how have these influenced your work ethic and how you approach your responsibilities?
So in the town of Shirley, we just recently had a recall election. My board was turned over. It's a 3-member board, such as yourself, and I recently had 2 new members, 2 that were recalled and 2 new members put on. As a manager, that was probably the most difficult but learning experiences I've ever been through in my life. It tests your professionalism as a manager and as a person. It tests your integrity. You know what the right thing is and you do it. I'm a person with very high integrity. I don't like it to be compromised. I would never let it be compromised. And the recall challenges that because there are fractions and you have to keep your personal opinion out, no matter what. The town was embroiled in an ugly recall, but I feel that as a manager, I've come out a better manager because of it. I've learned a lot because of it. And my goal in that was to protect the town. My role in that was very clear. If a challenge came up, I had to protect the town. And I did that earnestly and without fail.
Thank you. Can you describe, and it's not because I'm sitting here, can you describe the relationship with the town manager and the chair of the Board of Selectmen as you see it?
I see it as collective. I see the role as not one. I wouldn't be a my way or the highway type of town manager. I don't feel that works for the residents. I don't feel that works for the board. I don't feel a board constantly bucking up against the town manager is productive. I like to work with the board. I like to let them know what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll float out ideas just to see where the board is on them, just to see where their direction is. I constantly communicate with the board. I constantly let them know what's going on in town. If something comes up that they need to be aware of immediately, I let them know. I'll call them no matter what time of day it is. My relationship with the board is one of constant communication. I respect the board tremendously, and I feel no matter who's sitting in that seat, they deserve the respect from the town manager, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
One morning, the chair calls you and directs you to handle a situation differently from the way the board voted that night. The chair tells you he spoke with one other member of the board. What would you do? And then I have a
I'd
second
call the
part.
board. I'd call the members of the board and get the story straight. That's what I would do. And if it needed to come back onto the agenda, I would probably recommend to the chair that it be placed back on the agenda for full, open, transparent discussion.
So just a little bit expand on that. This matter was also discussed in executive session, and a reliable source tells you that the selectmen have been talking about this outside to the public.
It's a tough one. I mean, I gotta tell you, I deal with that. I've seen it. I think what you need to do is stress to the board that you're working with that these are executive sessions. They shouldn't be discussed outside. And if they do, it's a liability that could be created for the town. It's an exposure that you don't want to have happen. And if I did hear about it, I would probably directly engage in the board member and to talk about it.
Steve?
Upton has excellent department heads. Describe the town manager's role and relationship with department heads. How would you establish a leadership position? And how would you promote communication and teamwork within and across departments?
So right now in Shirley, I have multiple department heads. And when I first got to Shirley, obviously you have to build the trust of the department heads. It doesn't just appear the day you walk through the door. You have to work with them. You have to show them that your word is your bond. When you say something to a department head, you have to follow through. You can't just fluff it off like, oh, it's no big deal. What I usually do is I have department head meetings. I have finance team meetings with the finance team. I'll have public safety meetings with just the public safety team. So I'm constantly engaged with the department heads, even if it's in an informal basis. You know, I'm constantly popping in, checking in, seeing how things are going. We might be having an informal conversation that leads to a formal one or vice versa. Communication is something that I value and you have to have. How I instruct leadership again is my word is my bond. If I say to the fire department, we're going to get you a debt exclusion for the fire truck, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that happens. And luckily, recently, I've followed through, and that actually, we're on our way to a ballot. But, you know, that was through a lot of back and forth with the fire chief. Should we put it on the warrant? Should we not put it on the warrant? And when I finally said, trust me, put it on the warrant, it'll pass, he trusted me. And that took some time. We have years of built-up trust, and I think that's what you have to show. You have to have high integrity in this job. You can't just say something and then not go forward and do it.
This is a quick follow-up, and how would you keep department heads within budget?
Depends on which department. Sometimes it's not so easy. A lot of the departments can be incident-driven, as you know, like the police department. A fire truck breaks down, you know, it could, well, and surely it could blow the entire budget for the year. So you just got to keep on them. I have periodic conversations. I'm constantly looking at the monthly reports and seeing where the departments are. If I see at a certain period of time during the year where I know they should be, and they're a little over, I pick up the phone, we have a conversation, I find out what's driving that budget, what's making it go over. And sometimes it's incidental, like I said, something broke and they had to get it fixed. And sometimes, you know, it could be something else. But as long as I know and I've talked to the department head, I think, you know, that's usually how I do it. Just pick up the phone.
Okay, very good. All set? Yes.
Another hypothetical, but these things do happen. You're awakened at 2 o'clock in the morning from a call from a close friend who had been involved in a car accident here in Upton. And that friend admitted to you they were at a party and probably had a little too much to drink. They were alone or uninjured. The car has got damage to their own vehicle only. They're frightened and upset and they want your help. What do you do?
So I would call the police chief. That's probably my first phone call. Find out what happened, if he was aware of the accident, what occurred, and go from there. I don't think anyone's above the law, no matter who I know or anybody else. You know, the laws are in place for everybody.
Okay. Steve?
I think Gary's next.
Gary, I meant, sorry.
An employee has a family member who is with serious health issues and is the main caregiver. This employee has used up nearly all of his personal and sick time and will not take FMLA because he is the sole breadwinner. Now this employee is showing up late and sometimes not at all. How would you handle this?
Well, sometimes the unions, if they're a union member, there's sick banks available. So I'd have to see what type of employee it was. If it was a union member and a sick bank was available, I would probably go to the union president, work out something with the union president to see how long it would take that employee to get on their feet, see what the circumstances are. Sit down with the employee, talk to them, talk to the board members, talk to people maybe that know him or her in the community, and see how you can help. If a problem is presented to me, I don't really stop until it's fixed, no matter what it is, until it's solved.
Okay.
Okay. An employee of one of our departments has come to your office on her day off and reports to you that she feels she's being harassed, and her superiors are doing nothing about it. How would you handle this?
Okay. I have to say that I don't think you guys are throwing at me anything I haven't seen. Did have to deal with that one. Harassment on any level, discrimination on any level is a state offense. I'm obligated to have an investigation done. I had that happen. We had a discrimination claim. The first thing I did was pick up the phone to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, spoke to the other 2 members of the board, and we had an investigation. We hired an outside investigator to investigate if any discrimination had occurred. It's my responsibility to make sure that all the employees are protected in the town.
Okay. What do you think of the top, and probably related to these as well, what are the top 3 challenges facing municipal officials today? And follow-up, what actions would you take to ensure Upton's government is prepared to face these?
Sure. Well, I have discussions with colleagues in the field regularly. If you look at the area of Shirley and the surrounding areas, you'll see almost all the incumbents were voted out for some reason or another. I think there's a general mistrust going on with local government. I don't think people trust that the people that are sitting in your seats are there because they want to help the residents in their community. I've been on town boards. I know how much time and dedication it takes to do the volunteer work, and I think there's a lack of trust, unfortunately, with local government. I've seen the pitfalls and the minefields of politics in town, and I think I'd be able to help you guys steer away from those. I've seen it, and I've been able to understand what happens in a community that becomes divisive. I think you also have to be more transparent. You have to let people know what's going on. We've used Facebook in Shirley to help with that. I've used cable access to explain to the community what's going on. It's really about transparency, respect, and communication. Those are really the things that you need to continuously do and continuously work on. And I think you'll get there eventually, but it's a struggle, it's a challenge for municipal employees.
Thank you. Gary?
How will you keep yourself informed of the activities of your department heads, and how would you promote a more positive environment for them?
So in Shirley, we do department head meetings. I'm constantly talking and speaking, communicating with the department heads. Every so often, if I feel, people are getting a little dragged down, we'll have coffee in the morning, we'll do a lunch, we'll try to lighten up the mood a little bit, just so employees know that, it's okay and to keep it light. I want employees to come and want to come to work. That's what you want. You want employees to want to be here. So, I try to keep it light, try to keep it fun. My door's always open. If anyone just wants to pop in just to say hello, I'm there to talk. And right now I would say our staff is very much productive, on target. They seem to be happy. So.
Okay, Steve.
Please describe the most difficult employee matter you have experienced. What made this difficult for you? And looking back, should you have handled it differently?
Well, as a manager and an administrator, most of the issues that do arise are personnel related. I would say one of the ones I had told the search committee is when you have a lot of residents working in the town hall, sometimes they walk into your office and we're trying to work out a town problem. And sometimes what they're giving me is they have their resident hat on, that's what I call it. And sometimes that can be really frustrating for me as a manager if I need an answer from, let's say, the town accountant. I don't need the answer from the town resident at that point. I need to be able to bring the selectmen a solution to a problem that has been presented to me. And when that has occurred in the past, I've sat down with that department head and I said, look, I know you care about this issue. I know you have opinions on this issue, but you have to leave those at the door until we can figure out how to solve this problem. And that usually helps. If I were to do it differently, in that particular example, I think I would have explained more why it makes my job harder. I don't think I've done that. I think I need to put it from my point of view a little bit better to let her know it wasn't that I just discounted the residential side. I appreciate that. It's just, I needed to figure out a piece of the problem that didn't involve that. So.
Please describe what you believe to be the town manager's role in the community, and how do you establish communication links to enhance that, and i.e. what you view as customer service? So
my door's always open. I've said that. You go into the community. You don't sit in your office. That's one way to do it. I'm out there. I go to the senior center for breakfast, veterans breakfast. I volunteered on Meals on Wheels. I haven't missed a Memorial or Veterans Day events in town. I'm very connected to, I believe, the veterans in the community. I can tell you that in my time in Shirley, my appreciation for the veterans has doubled, tripled. I've been able to, have relationships with people in the community, and if anyone comes to me, I'll help them no matter how I can. It really doesn't matter who it is. Every event that's in town, I think I've been to a lot of them, and just, really getting out there. And not just town stuff, school stuff too. I've been to some school events. They have a opening every year for the teachers, a welcome back, and I've been there every year, welcoming them back, just showing them my face, who I am. Even though it's a regional school and a lot of people I wouldn't recognize because they live in a neighboring community, it doesn't matter. I'm out there and I try to show people that if they have a concern, a need, or anything, I'm there to help them.
Thank you. Gary?
Describe the approach you would take to address the desires of the member of this community to keep it as it is. Also, describe, just keep it as it is, as well as those in the community who want to see new ideas, innovation, and businesses which may change the nature of this community but expand the tax bases. What steps will you take to address all the needs in the best interest of the town?
So in any small town that's residentially driven, such as Upton or Shirley, you have a lot of people that come in saying, I moved here because of the way it looked, I don't want it to change. But then there's the other side, because you have services that you need to provide, and services go up. Expenses go up. You want to provide police, fire, DPW. That costs money. You need a diverse revenue source to do that. In Shirley, what we've been able to do is we've diversified some of our revenue. You're not going to get it all through the tax levy. You're not going to get it through state aid or local receipts. What we did is we looked at ways we could improve economic development by rezoning some parcels in town. We went to town meeting a couple of times. We were successful with one property that we were able to rezone mixed use. We put in some solar developments on town-owned land. We took advantage of National Grid's bid to do test sites. We responded to those. I'm constantly looking for opportunities. You have to be aware of the opportunities. You have to act on those opportunities for the betterment of the town. There's grant money out there from the state. I was able to get a MassWorks grant from the state. It was my third try. Every year I was denied twice. I would just keep going. After the second time I was denied, I showed up the next week in the Secretary of Housing and Development's office, meeting with him. I think we met outside the governor's office because he was in a meeting. I asked him, what can we do? How can I get on the radar? How do I get this grant for the community? It was a major infrastructure grant. It was a bridge in the center of town that it was just ugly to look at. And it had gone in disrepair for over a decade. It was just, it needed to be done. The town didn't have the money to do it. I called the Economic Development Office multiple times. I had them come out. We talked about my grant. I rewrote the grant from top to finish. I took it from a public safety perspective, and I was awarded the grant for $725,000. And they just signed the contract, and they're going to be working on the bridge. I don't stop until I get the results that the community is seeking, and that's what I do.
Just a little follow-up to that. Would the lack of the infrastructure hinder you at all? The lack of Upton's infrastructure by
No, you just,
rezoning or anything?
as I said, you just constantly look for the opportunities that present themselves. If you're not failing, you're not trying, and that's just the way it is. And you just keep trying until you succeed.
All set?
Yes, sir.
Steve? Describe your experience advocating for a municipality at the regional, state, and federal levels, and how that experience might be used in Upton to address major issues that have been facing the community in the next few years.
Well, I think I can go back to showing up at the Secretary's office to find out why I didn't get the MassWorks grant. I work with the state. In regards to the bridge project, I called my legislatures. I had them, lobby for me at that office as well. So if you want something for the town of Upton, if I want something for the town of Upton, it's presented to me, figure out how to get this done, I would contact anybody and everybody to get it done. And I would keep trying and I would keep doing it. If it meant calling the legislators, if it meant calling the state, if it meant calling, somebody in the federal offices, that's what I would do. I don't stop. I think that you want somebody that can do that for you, that won't let something go until it's done, and that's what I would bring to Upton.
Okay. I guess for a quick follow-up, and any experience or anything within that question that would lend itself to regionalization?
Oh, sure. When I got to Shirley, it was evident that Shirley's dispatch needed to go regional. We bordered two towns that had regional centers, one in Devens and one in Groton. The capital alone we couldn't afford for dispatch. I approached the fire chief, I approached the police chief. They just didn't seem interested. They didn't understand the benefits for regional. We looked at it from every which way. I kept trying different ways to say, this is something we should really look at. Finally, they relented and said, okay, maybe we can merge with another community and create a new regional dispatch. And that just didn't work. It didn't make sense if you were bordering two regional centers. We tried, it just wasn't feasible. I finally realized that I need to go outside. I need somebody to tell us, this is what you need to do. I was able to get a grant to do a feasibility study on what the best option for the town was, presenting all those three options, the two neighboring towns and creating a new one. The feasibility study recommended that we go to the Devens Regional Dispatch. We worked on that. I worked on that with the old board and then the recall of the new board, and we were able to just recently, with the new board, finally have a vote of the Board of Selectmen to enter into a regional dispatch. And that took a long time. It wasn't just convincing the board, it was convincing the community it was the right thing to do. It was convincing the department heads that it was the right thing to do. And hopefully within a year, Shirley's dispatch issues will cease.
You all set?
Yes.
I get the hypothetical ones. With the recent growth and popularity of blogs, instant media, and dissemination of news on the internet, and public discussion with anonymity, there are concerns less informed by trolley-type messages going out there. It creates a problem for any community. Please tell us how you have handled one or two of these issues in your community, and I'm sure Shirley's not too far removed from Upton. And how do you keep that debate civil and respectful?
Yeah, the blogs are tough, I gotta tell you. In some respect, they're good because they can disseminate dissemination, which is great, but sometimes that information that's being disseminated can be nasty. As an administrator and a manager, I try to keep it out of town hall. One of the things I'm most proud of with the Shirley recall, because there was a lot of blogging during that time, I was able to keep all that out of town hall. The staff, we still worked, we did our jobs. I was able to put a budget through. I started one budget with one board, finished it with another, and I still was able to have unanimous support of the board and the finance committee. I think as a manager, you sometimes have to tune it out. If it's not productive and doesn't lead you to anywhere, I don't see the purpose of really lending too much to it, unless it's something serious. And then there was an issue, I want to say, a year and a half ago, a blog was written. Somebody wrote something that it could be considered maybe a little threatening to somebody in the community. Immediately made sure the chief knew about it, the police chief, and you try to do the best you can to make sure it doesn't happen. I think when blogs cross a line, that's when I get involved. But other than that, I try to stay out of it.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
As the new town manager, how would you evaluate your current structure, effectiveness, and efficiencies of our various town departments? How would you approach making any changes you believe that were necessary? How would you evaluate the teams delivering service to the town?
So any manager coming in obviously should not make swift, huge changes when they first come in. I mean, you got to come in, you got to see the lay of the land, you got to find out, you got to find out about the relationships, and you got to build that trust that I was talking about before. You got to look, you got to listen, you got to understand the dynamics of a town before you can even make or suggest a change. You work with the board. I think in the first 6 months, what I would do, the first thing I would do is I would go to every board and committee's meeting, obviously introduce myself, find out what they're dealing with, what their challenges are, what they're working on. For the first 6 months, the board is really the go-to people for me to kind of decipher what's going on in Upton. And then once I would get a understanding of Upton, the needs, the critical areas, the priorities, then I would slowly start making recommendations to the board of what I think. Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we'll disagree, but it's just how it is. But I don't do anything without the consent of the board. I would never do anything without the consent of the board. I don't find that to be in my best interest or the town's best interest.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve, please. Yeah.
The town manager plays a key and active role in community development-related issues in Upton. The town wishes to expand its tax base, however, there are competing thoughts as to what type of development is desirable and how to control development in order to preserve our community character. Tell us how you will help the community answer these critical questions. What approach will you take to achieve consensus? And speaking of our tax base, as is in other towns, there are concerns about the size of the tax bills and some point to the town manager as a determining, if not the determining factor in the size of the tax bill. Describe the extent of the relationship between the town manager and the size of the tax bill.
So how I approach any budget that I am about to, so let's say FY19 budget in Upton, what I would do is, I would do what I've usually done is build consensus from the beginning. You got to do that. So my budget process is I meet with the department heads. I make those meetings cohesive. I ask members of the finance committee to come. I'll ask a member of the board of selectmen to come. And from there, we just inform and we discuss and we talk about all those things. What the town needs versus how that's going to impact the community and the tax rate. It's a collective, collaborative process. The budget has to be. We have budget hearings on that. Once the budget's put together, we put it online. I make sure that it's in a place where residents, if they have questions, can ask. We work with the boards and committees before those budgets are proposed to the public. I think it's important to have that consensus from the beginning. You need it. It's not just my budget that I'm proposing to the town. It's our budget. It's what we think is in the best interest of the community and how to move the community forward. And by the time it gets to town meeting, it really should just be a vote of up or down. It really shouldn't have as many discussion points because from the beginning, everyone has a voice in that budget from the beginning. I'd have to really dive in. That's probably one of the first things I do as the town manager. I dive into the budget and see what it's about, where the revenues are, where the expenses are, the actuals versus estimates. I've seen your estimated receipts. You seem to estimate very conservatively. That is an approach that I do as well. And you just got to dig right down and find out what the budget drivers are. There are obviously the obvious ones like health and benefits and things like that. But sometimes there's things in there that, on its face, you need more understanding.
Just a quick follow-up. How will you adjust your management experience to our budget as compared to where you're currently working? Kind of in a dollars and cents approach. Size of our budget.
Oh,
size of yours.
Municipal budgets are pretty similar. It's just yours have more zeros. That's really, I work on all the recaps, the balance sheets. I work on that yearly. That's a submission to the state. That doesn't change. That's all uniform. So, like I said, you have a few more zeros than Shirley.
That's all.
This is an opportunity for you if you want to make any comments or ask any questions of us. Obviously, we've gone through the scripted part, so.
We have a lot of what ifs I like, although I've seen them all. So, I guess my question to the board would be the challenges that you see for your next town manager and what those are.
It's like any town, especially there are a lot of similarities between town like Shirley and Upton. We pride ourselves in trying to engage more of the community and boards, and we have a good volunteer support. We're very lucky to have that. Again, it becomes taxation, and people don't understand, and I said this, and I'll repeat myself, people don't understand they are the ones that vote the taxes. They go to town meeting and they spend, and that creates a tax bill. They vote for issues on the ballot, and they vote a $1.4 million school override, their taxes are going to go up. There seems to be somewhat of a misunderstanding of that, so there tends to be a real concern, and sometimes very justified, of the tax rate and the present taxation in Upton. It's gone up significantly in the last few years, primarily due to the override for the school. A $1.4 million on $20 million budget's pretty easy to understand. The other thing is the typical growth issues of needing to expand capital with a limited base, equipment, safety, whether it be safety, DPW. But we have I feel, a methodical plan for that. We do work in very good collaboration with both the regional school district and our finance committee and our boards, so that there is, you used the word consensus multiple times, there is a lot of consensus. Our last town meeting, we went to the town meeting with consensus of the finance committee and the board of selectmen and the school committees, and that's always makes it easier. So we'd like to keep that going. I think there's a perception, candidly, some citizens feel town hall is distant from them. We probably need to bring that back and let them know it's their town hall. That's something that we need to work on, but it's not any different than what I think you've experienced. So, okay, anything else?
No, I just would like to leave, I guess, by saying that, as I stated in the beginning, when I work in a community, I take on that community. I know I didn't grow up here, but it's my second home, and I start to really care about those people, and that's what I hope, and that's what I will bring to the town of Upton. You're going to have a town manager that works collectively with boards and committees for the betterment of its residents, and that's what I'd like to leave you with.
My first note is type A. I relate. That's not a derogatory by any means. We're scheduled to meet Wednesday. We will be in executive session, but in that, it's going to give the board a few days to go through all the interviews and the comments, and then we will come to some form of consensus, working with MRI. We will build an offer to the selected candidate, and as you know, there's a screening that goes through background checks and everything else, but other than that, that's pretty much where we are. I would suggest if you have any further follow-up questions, you can contact MRI or our town manager, and they'll be able to
Forward to
answer.
hearing from you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in.
Nice to meet you, thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Okay, 10-minute recess. Our next candidate is coming up shortly, Derek Brindisi, I would pronounce it, also from Worcester, Mass. So we'll wait, and when that gentleman comes up, we'll resume the questioning.
Yes, sir. It's Gary Dart, nice to meet you.
Hi, Derek. How are you?
Steve Italian, nice to meet you.
Please make yourself comfortable. As I joked with everyone else, you have a nice soft chair, so we're trying to...
It's actually the hot
Yeah,
seat, isn't it?
Well, we're trying to put everyone in a relaxed position here. As you probably are aware, we have some pre-written questions which we'll go through independently. Each member of the board will be asking you these questions with potential follow-ups. At the end of this, there'll be again a time for you to speak and ask any questions of us. For an opening note, we'd like to give you the opportunity, if you want to do an intro and give a little bit of your background and who you are. We have all the information, but it's more for public dissemination.
Sure. You want me to start?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Sure. So good morning. My name is Derek Brindisi. Currently, I serve as the Assistant Town Manager in the town of Plymouth. Just to kind of give you a brief history of my experiences, I started working for the city of Worcester in 2000. Had many different roles working for the city of Worcester. In 2004, I had the opportunity to lead a FEMA program called the Metropolitan Medical Response System. That gave me a really unique perspective to responding to a catastrophic event. I was the planner for that, so it was my charge to organize public safety, fire and EMS, hospitals, health centers, public health, to pull them all together, emergency management, to pull them all together so we could develop these plans to, again, respond to disasters. That was actually my first opportunity to really understand what planning was all about. So it was a unique experience. I then became director. I was asked in 2009, right after 9C cuts, to become director of the health department. I led that for about 10 years. I led a number of community-driven processes that were data-driven, that required it required myself and our staff to not only engage community residents, but businesses across the spectrum, nonprofits, for example. I then left that position and currently serve as the assistant town manager. I've had a unique experience to be the primary negotiator in collective bargaining. I'm the point person when it comes to grievances, to arbitration hearings. In fact, I spent the day in Boston on Friday on a fact-finding case. That's one of my primary roles. I have a number of different folks that report to me. The procurement office reports directly to me, so I am certified in public purchasing. I work with the procurement officer to do that. We have a $220 million budget. I also have the airport, town clerk, and the health division also report directly to me. I'm a part of the town manager's financial planning team, which is made up of finance director, town manager, myself, the treasurer collector, the assessor, and a few others. During my time in Plymouth, I've also chaired the Affordable Housing Trust, and we had a cable advisory committee, and I led the renegotiations with Comcast this past year. We settled that agreement. During my time in Worcester, to go back a few minutes, I was also the ADA coordinator, so I've had a chance to meet with Mr. Reed and learn a little bit about what's going on here in town, in particular what's going on with the Kiwanis Park, and the fact that the town's working on an ADA transition plan. So given the fact that I spent 2 years in Worcester as the ADA coordinator as a secondary responsibility, I feel like I have that unique experience to support the work that's before you today. And then I think I missed one piece in Worcester, that I did spend 2 years in public works. So I feel like I have a really strong background in public works infrastructure, water and sewer in particular. And again, understanding after talking to Mr. Reed that you're in the process of really reconsidering or considering the build out of a new DPW facility. So I think, again, my experience lends me nicely to some of the things that you have going on here today. And lastly, I'll end with the fact that I've served about 16 years in the Air Force. I'm currently a major up at Pease Air National Guard Base, where I serve as a medical officer.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll start with the questions, and then, again, at the end, there'll be a conclusion. So, go ahead, Gary, please.
We are sure that you did a great deal of research as a candidate for this position. Please give us your impression of Upton. Tell us why you are a good fit for this community, and what will you bring to this town that we are lacking?
Sure. Well, I think stole a little bit of my thunder because I mentioned a few of those items, but I have spent, I think, considerable amount of time really researching the community, one, and two, not only while I did that, I really wanted to get a better understanding of whether or not Upton was a good fit for me as well. And so my wife and I, we've spent a couple of weekends here just kind of driving around, trying to understand the geography of the community first and foremost. I attended your annual town meeting, and I was put in the bullpen up in the corner, I think to the Board of Selectmen's right. So I really wanted to have a chance to understand kind of the tone at town meeting, some of the conversations that were taking place. So again, trying to educate myself more on Upton. And then lastly, I spent some time with Mr. Reed, again, as another opportunity to hear firsthand what's going on in the community. And I think I touched on some of those relative to Kiwanis Park, the DPW facility, and then also heard a little bit about and read a little bit about the library and kind of the future needs of the library. Is it going to be expansion? What's the best location for the library? So again, you know, as the more research I did, learning about Upton, I really felt and I still believe that my experiences and the things that I've done during the course of my career fit nicely with the time and place that you're in today. In 10 years from now, who knows? But I feel like what you're doing today, I fit very nicely with those experiences. And I think that, again, I mentioned my public works background. I think that I would work alongside the DPW director with the Board of Selectmen to make the best determination on affordability, priority setting, things of that nature. Overall, I think that what I've learned from the town, given my experiences, but more importantly, my approach to being a municipal manager, I think lends itself nicely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Steve?
What are your personal core values? How were these instilled in you, and how have these influenced your work ethic and how you approach your responsibilities?
Great. So, well, I guess I'd start by my foundation with my parents, first and foremost. My father taught CCD. I was raised in an Italian Catholic household, so my mom was a stay-at-home mother, and so she kept us out of trouble because she stayed at home. And again, my father was a CCD instructor, and so I think that's where my core values began. But I think that my core values have continued through the Air Force, and so I have in front of me your strategic leadership plan that was authored in 2014. And I've had a chance to review it, and you talk about core values of integrity, commitment, service, and fiscal stewardship. And so those are very much in line, if you're familiar with the core values of the Air Force, which are integrity, service for self, and excellence in all we do. So I think, again, speaking to are we a good fit, what's been documented in your strategic leadership plan around core values, my upbringing, as a child, but then has it's continued in the Air Force, I think align very nicely, and in fact, we use common language.
Okay. Could you describe what you see the relationship between the town manager and the chair of a board of selectmen? I don't ask that because I am. It's a generic question, but.
Specifically regarding the chair, well, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak to my relationship with the chair in Plymouth. Mm-hmm. He's a very hands-on, active chair. Either myself or the town manager spend at least an hour with him every morning. If not in the morning, every afternoon he comes in, and he likes to know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. It gives us an opportunity to always keep the Board of Selectmen engaged, keep them informed. Typically, he likes to be the first to know about issues that are happening. If we don't see him, so for example, the town manager went on vacation for approximately 2 weeks this past April. I was the acting town manager at that time. So when I didn't have a chance to communicate with him verbally, I would send the board, and not only himself, but the board as a whole, regular updates of things that were happening. We had a couple individuals who walked away from one of our local prison. So always keeping the board chairman informed, keeping him engaged, trying to mitigate any surprises that may happen by always having that open dialogue.
Okay, thank you very much. Gary?
You all set, sir? One morning, the chair calls you and directs you to handle an issue differently from which the board voted that night. The chair tells you that he spoke to one other member and that they both agree on changing the vote. How would you handle this situation?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I think that has happened on occasion directly, in some of the communities I've worked in. And so I have been able to really kind of talk the board chairman through that process without having to openly say, excuse me, sir, but I haven't heard that publicly, so therefore I really shouldn't act on it. It's more about having that communication where they kind of understand the position that I would be in to act on a situation based on someone's word, for example. So I would really want to have that conversation, try to talk the chairman out of asking me to do that. I think that's a question of integrity and not in open and honesty and lack of transparency. I believe heavily in transparency, and so I'd be put in a bad position to do that, but I think at the end of the day, we wouldn't act on it.
And just one little follow-up to this. To go on, this matter that was discussed was an executive session, and now that you heard that the selectmen are talking about this out in the public, how would you handle that?
That one's a little bit easy answer. The fact of the matter is, I would try to re-educate the board as a whole on open meeting law and the consequences of violating open meeting law. Even when we send emails in Plymouth, we try to remind the board that don't respond, reply all, because you're going to violate open meeting law. So this is a very similar situation where it's more about education, trying to getting the board to understand that they could be at risk of violating open meeting law.
Push the talk button so we can continue the air conditioning. No, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't want it to be 95.
That was just me.
Thank you. Okay. All right,
All right.
yes, Steve?
All right, Derek. Upton has excellent department heads. Describe the town manager's role and relationship with department heads. How would you establish a leadership position, and how would you promote communication and teamwork within and across departments?
Well, I'd start by saying that I would describe myself as a collaborative leader. So that's kind of the leadership style that I follow. I think that we should treat our department heads as equals when we communicate with them. When I was in Worcester, so although I was the department head, I had 3 senior leaders that I had said on a regular basis, I would say to them, listen, I just have to be sitting in the seat. Any one of you could be sitting in this seat at any given time. I was just fortunate enough to have been appointed by the city manager to do that. But what I was trying to do is trying to let them know that we're all equals here. And the fact of the matter is, like, what we need to do is we need to brainstorm. We need to have open dialogue because it's during those conversations that we bring out the best and the brightest in what we have to offer the community. So that would be my initial approach with them, trying to allay any concerns that they feel that there's a heavy-handed town manager who's now in the community. So that's how I would start. But just as important, I do believe in planning. I do believe in strategic planning, and I do believe that we all, whether it's our elected officials or our appointed officials, we kind of need to know where we're going. So at some point in the future, I'd like to work with the board on starting to identify areas where we can develop a strategic plan on whether it's our 5-year financial plan or our master plan or economic development plan, but something that tells not only department staff or our frontline workers, but the community where this town is headed. And so, and by doing that, you bring people on board. So it's a really good leadership style without having to be so directive.
And a quick follow-up to that. And how would you keep them within budget? Speaking again of department heads and your leadership role.
Yeah, and that's why I think a 5-year financial plan is extremely helpful because I have your capital improvement plan, which is projected out to 2022. But beyond that capital improvement, what is your financial plan? How are you going to invest your free cash, and by percentages? How are you going to respond to OPEB? And so by laying that, by everyone understanding that process, what we can afford, what are our projected revenues, what are our projected expenses, and if folks see that years out, then I hope it'll help mitigate individual or department heads not trying to maintain their budget. I had an issue in Plymouth where folks, there are some old traditional municipal managers who think, okay, I got to spend it. We're hitting May, I got to spend my money, because if I don't spend my money, they're going to take it away. And then they just start spending. There's a frenzy of spending that's going on. And so we implemented some easy controls that require purchase orders for everybody. And so that allows one to have some controls over spending, but more importantly, it fosters dialogue between the financial management team and the department head when they start asking questions. Well, why are we spending this money? You're already over budget, and so having certain policies and certain controls in place will help prevent departments from going over budget.
Very good.
Thank you. Another hypothetical, but you're awakened at 2 a.m. with a call from a close friend who's been involved in an automobile accident in Upton. The friend admits that they were at a party, had a little too much, were driving their own car. The vehicle is damaged, but there's no personal injury, but they're really upset and nervous, and they call you for your help. What's your response to that?
This is a personal friend, does this have to do with Upton or just a personal
A
friend?
personal friend that's in Upton that gets in an accident after being at a party, and their vehicle is damaged, and they're really nervous, and they're frightened and upset, and they want your help. How do you address that situation?
Well, I think first and foremost, I want to make sure they're safe. And I would, personally, if it was a friend of mine, I would come down here to ensure their safety. I'd extract them from the vehicle. I'd get authorities involved so that they could take the complaint, they could issue a report, so that everyone realizes that everything has been done in the most honest and truthful manner. The knee-jerk reaction sometimes in that situation is, well, let me find this person, let me take him home, right? The problem is when you're in a public position and you do that, and that goes public, that you found your friend, you put him in a vehicle, and you brought him home, so basically you tried to do an end around law enforcement, you lose all credibility in your community forever. And so you can't risk the credibility that you have as a public official because somebody made a mistake. Ultimately, that wrong will be righted through the court system if that's the course it takes. So I think the decisions we make as public officials, you really have to think about the straight face test when you're in front of a judge and losing public credibility. And so for those reasons, again, first and foremost, I want to make sure that person's safe. I want to be with that person, but I want to get law enforcement involved so we have everything documented.
Thank you.
Gary? You all set, sir?
Yep.
An employee has a family member with a serious health issue and is the main caregiver. This employee used up nearly all of his sick and personal time and will not take FMLA because he is the sole breadwinner. Now this employee is showing up late and sometimes not at all. How would you handle this?
So there's two sides to that coin. There's the person who is considered a habitual offender of sick time, personal time, vacation time. Every month they earn that sick day, they take it. Those individuals, it's very challenging to do something for, to think creatively about helping them out. And so for those reasons, I think that there's probably nothing that we could do for them. However, there are situations, and many of us have been in them, where we have sick family individuals, and for whatever reason, maybe they've only been employed for a couple years and they haven't had the opportunity to accrue their sick time. They don't have as much time. And I've had this experience in a couple of different communities. Worcester, personally, that happened to me. My son needed an organ transplant at 6 years old. I spent part of his care in Pittsburgh, because that's where his transplant had taken place. And the city of Worcester did something for me, and not because I didn't have time. They created a sick bank for me, and they allowed employees to donate. We've done the same in Plymouth, where we've had some folks who have come on hard times, who have done everything they can in their power to prevent this from happening, or trying to be responsible. And we've created special situations where we've created sick banks. This has happened for fire, and it gives those folks a peace of mind to focus on what they need to focus on, and that's the care for an ill family member. So again, I think in many cases, sometimes when it comes to family tragedies or family illness, we should really consider having a case-by-case basis sometimes.
Thank you. You all set?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Gary? Steve, sorry.
An employee of one of our departments has come to your office on her day off and reports to you that she feels she is being harassed, and her superiors are doing nothing about it. How will you handle this?
Well, if harassment's the term that's used, I'd want to bring in at least a third party to sit with me, and I want to document it. I want to document the words that are being used. For example, maybe I would ask Sandy to sit in on me so that she can also be a witness to the words that are being used. At that point, then I want to sit down with the department head. Also, in this case, I use Sandy as an example, sorry for putting you on the spot. Sit on that so that we have a kind of common understanding of what's happening in that department. After I like to do fact finding, so after I do some fact finding, depending on the outcome of the investigation, there could be disciplinary action that could be taken, there could be termination that's taken, or there could be no cause found. So, but that would be my approach, to try to pull apart or tease apart some of the things that are happening.
Thank you. What do you think of the three top challenges facing municipal officials today? And I know you're in Plymouth, but it probably applies to the same. And what actions would you take to ensure Upton's town government is effectively prepared to face these challenges over the next few years?
3. So I'll try to list the 3. So financial planning, trying to prevent Prop 2.5 overrides is a challenge I think most communities are facing these days. I know that another challenge that communities are facing today is community resiliency, responding to, in many cases, mostly natural disasters, whether it's floodings, winter storms. That's a major challenge that most communities are facing as well. So I guess if I want to address trying to prevent a Prop 2.5 override or financial planning, I want to work initially across all the different departments, and with the school department in particular. As we know, it's a 50% driver or plus 50% driver of our annual operating costs. So sitting down with the school superintendent and trying to get a better sense of what's driving his or her costs, and what are some of the strategies we can use to either keep those costs level funded or hopefully try to reduce those costs. I know, for example, in Plymouth, our school department, their energy consumption is at net zero because of some of the actions they have taken. So let's try to learn a little bit about that. But again, the financial piece is very large. I would like to think, working with the board, if we could develop an economic development committee, at least to do some research, try to understand what's happening in the community, what are some economic drivers that are happening around the community that we could maybe draw in. But again, trying to balance that from what I understand is a community that wants to maintain its New England roots. So at the end of that process, we may not decide to do anything because it may destroy what we're trying to preserve. So those are some ways as far as trying to maintain the budget. Relative to maintaining the budget, I also I've done some research on your budget. I've done some research on your debt and what's coming off of debt, what's some of the debt that's coming off. And when you look at what Mendon did, and I agree, and the Division of Local Services would also agree, is when debt's coming off, let's continue that debt, but let's move that somewhere else. So where else do we have, for example, infrastructure needs? And Mendon just did that. I think the school buildings come off of debt, and now they're moving it to a new police station. So the risk that you run if you don't do that, then the debt that you incurred is going to start to be eaten into your operating budget. And then over time, that's going to hurt you because you'll have all this deferred maintenance and you'll never be able to afford it. So I wanted to, I know it's a three-part question, but I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about finances. So, I looked at your budget, and so oftentimes you say, well, let's cut the budget. Let's see where there's fat. Well, I think there's not a lot of fat in municipal budgets these days. And so I just did a cursory review of your budget, and you look at the breakdown, and you have education is about 60%, and then you have public safety, police, EMS, which is about an additional 14%, and then you have all your fixed costs like health insurance, your debt, things of that nature, which represents another 9%. And so I guess the picture I'm trying to paint here, there's not a lot of room to cut. I mean, we can find some efficiencies, we can do some shared services, but there's not going to be a lot of places, and maybe we can do some consolidation, but you're not going to be able to, you're not going to save millions and millions of dollars by looking at your budget. So you have to look at other places to try to work on your finances. I'd want to work with the Board of Assessors on how they do evaluations in the community and whether or not we're doing field reviews, which is, again, a best practice that DLS would suggest. So those are some ways I'd want to adjust the budget, but I don't want to spend too much more time on that only because I know you had, there's two other parts to that question. So as far as community resiliency, again, you know, we look at it, we look around us, whether it's a blizzard that happened a few years ago, it dropped about 36 inches of snow one day, or it's just, I feel like these 100-year storm water floods are happening more like every 5 years these days. So I'd want to work with DPW and emergency management, try to address a lot of planning, working on grants like EPA grants, working with EOPS on some of their grants, so that we could have the infrastructure to not only respond to those times of need, but more importantly, how can we mitigate those so we can try to prevent the flood versus having to respond to the flood. And so I guess you had, there's a three-part to that. So what would be the third item that we should address?
You had said work with departments to create efficiencies, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, and you know, I think that, well, I know that when we think about where we're headed, when I was in Worcester, we developed a strategic plan. And so I bring some of this to you all just because it's easy to say we've done these things, but I actually wanted to have it documented. So I'm going to hand you two things, and this would be kind of the third area I'd want to work with the Board of Selectmen and with the department heads on. So in 2014, we developed this strategic plan. We were the only department in the city that had a strategic plan, but again, we brought all 25 FTEs along with us along the strategic plan. We had goals, we had objectives, and we had measurement tools that would help us identify whether or not we were successful or not. Again, the only department that had done that, and then as an adjunct to that, and I noticed that you have something similar in your strategic plan, as we developed a quality improvement plan. So you have used the language of quality, constant quality improvement in your strategic plan, but we've done the same. And so I think that's really important. We had a quality improvement council that was internally within our department that we would meet on a regular basis and try to identify, we would ask certain divisions within our department to bring issues up to us. What's a problem? What's happening that we could address? So for example, I think as a board, you know, you've heard loud and clear that folks are want you to address the acoustics in the big town hall. We'd bring that to our quality council and say, how can we address this problem? And they would pull it apart and they'd come back with a recommendation. And so we did that in the department on a regular basis, which became the new culture in how we were going to deliver services at a municipal level. And I also didn't mention that we provided services not only to City of Worcester, but to 6 other municipalities through IMAs as well. So we were servicing not just Worcester, but 6 additional towns.
Thank you. Gary?
Sir, how will you keep yourself informed with the activities of your department heads, and how do you promote a positive work environment?
As far as information goes, I think I would want to have regular scheduled department head meetings. The frequency, I think, can be determined. We do once a week right now in Plymouth. We have a lot going on in Plymouth, but I would want to start with once a week with the department heads, and that helps promote cross-pollination of what's happening with our different departments. Each department head is given a chance to talk about what's on their front burner. What do they see? What's their 2-week outlook look like? And that spurs conversation so folks not only know what's going on, but more importantly, they can support each other. On many occasions in those conversations, we have from the fire chief would say something, and then DP director would say, well, I'm working on that as well. So, one, we prevent duplication of efforts, but we support each other and we leverage each other's resources. So that's how I would begin my my tenure as town manager is through department head meetings.
Steve?
Please describe the most difficult employee matter you have experienced. What made this difficult for you? And looking back, should you have handled it differently?
My most challenging employee matter, so again, in my position, I deal with a lot of grievances, a lot of arbitration hearings, and a lot of disciplinary hearings. So, that kind of runs the gamut of what folks have done. But I would say my most challenging one was this past year, where we had a division head who really, so I spent some time with her. I conducted an audit of her division. We put her on a improvement plan, performance improvement plan. I met with her on a weekly basis to try to help guide her, to bring her to a position where we all felt we were achieving the work that we needed to achieve within that division. Unfortunately, she didn't see it the same way. So over the course of a year, although we were trying to coach her up, it wasn't working. And I had a few other folks with me trying to do this. And then over time, what ended up happening is she became a detriment to the safety of the community. That caused me to go through the progressive discipline process with a verbal reprimand, letter of counseling. I mean, this took again, because we were trying to work with her. It took a little over a year. In the end, I think she realized that it probably wasn't in her best interest to continue her employment. We didn't terminate her, but I think she understood that what the town manager and myself were expecting from her, she was not going to be able to deliver. But I tell that story only because we did everything we could to identify her shortcomings, provide recommendations to repair those, and get her to a place where we would all be on the same page. And for her, it just didn't work out.
Would you have done anything different in that situation, or do you feel like it ran its due course?
No, I don't think I could have done anything different in this situation. Again, because, I guess the only thing I could have done is, like, if I had, hindsight being 20/20, knowing a year later I kind of wasted a year doing this. But I feel like in the end of the day, like, we did everything we could, and we said that with her, and we, we wished her well in the future. But there's probably nothing else I could have done.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can you describe what you see town manager's role in the town of Upton? Specifically, how would you establish communication and links to the community at large? Obviously, you're going to come in this town, no one's going to know you, there's going to be that curiosity factor. How would you extend yourself for customer service?
Well, I'll start by saying I took 4 years of culinary, and I can help out the pancake breakfasts once a year. But I use that jokingly, but that is a way to engage not only staff, but it's a way to engage community, right? So you're at these events and you're having conversations with folks. People, this is a real life human being who's in front of them. They can ask you questions, they can share what's on their mind, they can share their concerns. So, I believe in transparency. I believe that the town manager's office needs to be accessible. I don't want to use the term open door policy because I think it's been overused over the last 2 decades, but you have to have some type of open door policy where folks can come in, they feel like they're being heard, they feel like what they have to say means something. I would always say that people have a story to tell, and so you try to give them that opportunity to tell that story. So that's kind of with the community. There's a lot of public events. I know you have an event that's coming up in a few weeks with fireworks, I believe. Those are opportunities to get out there with my wife, just meet people, just kind of be present. so folks know who you are. As far as staff, personally, I'd like to meet every person that works for the town of Upton in my first month. So go down to the police station, introduce myself to who's on staff that day. Go to the fire station, go to the DPW. Some staff feel like they'll never be heard, and so they know who I am. They shake my hand, we have a small conversation, we have coffee and donuts, but at least they know who I am. And then any individual who's hired after that, I'd want to meet them on their first day. So again, they know who I am, they know that they're coming to work for a great community, and we're here to support them so they're successful in their career as town employees. So those would be a couple ideas I would have to try to meet folks.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Describe the approach you would take to address the desires of members of this community to keep it as it is, as well as those in the community who want to see more ideas, innovation, and business which may change the nature of the community, but expand the tax base. What steps would you take to address the needs in the best interest of the town?
So that goes back to the Economic Development Committee. I think what we should do is, if the board desires, they want to create this committee, we develop this committee. We identify folks from a broad spectrum of residents, from those folks who want to see change, those folks who want to keep things the same way, engage those folks that are representing the business community. I think that there's a lot of things we can learn from those that have been here for many, many years and continue to stay here in town. And then have those conversations, do best practice research. EPA has a framework for economic development that I'd like folks to consider. And then just go through this process, this open, public, transparent process where we weigh the costs, we weigh the benefits, we weigh potential revenues from expansion, and then folks will have to make that decision, and that's why we go to town meeting. We present that as an article in front of town meeting, we let the voters decide. But in the end of the day, folks need to have as much information as possible to make an informed decision. And that's, I think, my role as a town manager, is to provide as much as I can so that they have all the corners covered, and then they can say, at the end of the day, if they made that decision in 5 years, they may look back and say it was a bad decision, but at least I could say, we gave you as much information we could at that moment so that you knew the decision you were making at that time.
Thank you.
Okay. Describe your experience advocating for a municipality at the regional, state, and federal levels, and how that experience might be used in Upton to address major issues that may be facing the community in the next few years.
Advocating at local, state. So during my time in Worcester, again, I sat on a couple of statewide boards, and I was a strong advocate for regionalization. I had presented in front of the commission on a couple of different occasions. I really believe that if we pooled our resources, we can not only have a level budget, but we could increase the services we were offering that community by pooling resources. And so that's a really good example of some of the work I've done on kind of regional level as far as advocacy. I still sit on a statewide policy-making board now, where my position on that policy-making board is to advocate for what potential regulations are in front of us, what impact they're going to have on locals. So I do that on a regular basis. I have become the voice for local municipalities on that policy-making board. I was appointed to that board by Governor Patrick back in 2013, I believe it was. So those are kind of some examples I've done for that. And from a perspective of getting into it because I really believe in our community and taking a kind of a hard and fast line, recently I've had some aggressive dialogue with a state department that, in my opinion, isn't they aren't being responsible. They work in our community, things are happening in the community, it's causing a major concern with our residents, and so I've engaged them at the commissioner's level, and I have said, this is what we're asking you to come before the Board of Selectmen. They rejected it. They've used, the governor's office as an example to reject it. And so I've continued to advocate to let them know that this is our community, you're working in our community, although you think you're state officials, you can't just do what you want and walk away, because at the end of the day, everything begins and ends locally. And so we're the ones that have to answer these questions to the residents. So that's an ongoing dialogue. In the end, I always believe that the locals will be able to demonstrate that they have a need, and that'll win out.
And was there anything at the federal level?
Federal level, yeah. So when I was the MMRS coordinator, the FEMA grant I told you about, I spent probably about 2 or 3 times a year. Myself and other officials from around the country, we always would meet in Washington, D.C. We worked with a professional coordinator, I'll call her, that helped set up meetings with congressmen and others so that we could advocate what's happening at the local level when it comes to emergency response with our public health, public safety, and emergency management officials. So I had done that for the better part of 2 years, walking on the Hill, trying to educate our federal delegation on why this program was so important and why they needed to continue to fund it. Back then, the president was he was eliminating that from the budget each and every year. So we have to fight to get it back in the budget every year.
Thank you.
And I'll abbreviate this one, it's rather long, but with the recent growth and popularity of blogs and some of the things that are put out on websites and vitriolic type public discussion with anonymous bloggers, it's created a problem in many communities, and it's become standard. We're not isolated to that. Can you tell us how you've handled these in the past, and what role should the town manager play in lowering that volume, if any?
Yeah, I'm happy to ask that question. So I'm actually in the process of drafting a social media policy right now for the town of Plymouth. I think I'm on draft 4. Because it's very complex, social media, how we handle it as municipalities, how we respond to items that are happening on social media, how social media is affecting our employees, especially our bargaining unit employees, and what rights they have through their collective bargaining. So it's very complex. But I would say this, that I think social media is a great platform for municipalities to use to inform the community of what's happening. It could be used even more to talk about the great work that what's happening. Oftentimes, we'll talk if there's a road closure or there's, schools out of session, we use it. But there's a lot of good things that are happening in the community. I don't think we use that part enough to talk about the positive stories. Oftentimes municipalities get criticized for making the wrong decision, and we never get complimented for all the right decisions we make. So I think social media can be used in that sense to try to spread the message of how our $22 million each year is being put to work. That being said, we will still have those folks that are sitting in their basement and they're blogging all morning. That we can't prevent that, and they're going to put things on our Facebook or our Twitter. And my opinion, although all don't agree with me, I don't think we should respond to those. If folks want to file a complaint, we could list that on our website, we could list that on our Facebook profile, but to get into a back and forth public dialogue on social media is in no one's best interest. And I've seen some communities do that. And so my position is that we use it as a one-way communication device to let folks know what's going on, but we prevent the back and forth dialogue of somebody saying that, we didn't pave the street the correct way or we didn't plow our streets the correct way.
Thank you, appreciate it. Gary?
As the new town manager, how would you evaluate our current structure, its effectiveness throughout the various town departments? How would you make or change any approaches necessary?
Well, I think, that's going to take some time. And the more time you're in this seat, you start to understand, what is the structure like, what's the culture like, which is probably just as important, the culture. And you've identified areas of opportunity. Are there areas where we could share services with a neighboring community? I know you're already doing that in some places, like the Board of Health, for example. but other opportunities that we may want to revisit. Should we consolidate some of our services so we have more of a leaner, more efficient form of government? Or maybe the current structure works because that's what our community expects. So I would really spend a lot of time educating myself on what the current structure is, asking a lot of questions with our department heads, meeting with boards and committees as well. I mean, many of our board and committee members have been in the community for a very long time, and they have a lot of that institutional and historical knowledge that I would want to draw from. So, having coffee with folks from the Board of Selectmen, the ZBA, just so I can get a better sense of kind of what's been happening. And again, trying to understand that, there are personal agendas out there, so trying to wade through all that as well.
Thank you. Steve?
The town manager plays a key and active role in community development-related issues in Upton. The town wishes to expand its tax base. However, there are competing thoughts as to what type of development is desirable and how to control development in order to preserve community character. Tell us how you think you can help the community answer these critical questions. What approach will you take to achieve consensus? And speaking of the tax base, as in other towns, there are concerns about the size of tax bills. At some point, to the town manager is determining the actual amount of the tax bills. Describe the extent of the relationship between the town manager and the tax bill.
In the what?
The tax bill, the actual tax bill.
Right. Oh, that's a long question. So again, I think that the best approach is through an open, community-driven approach. I don't think it's appropriate for the town manager to be the determining factor on the best use of land, where to site certain projects. I would want to use the technical knowledge of CMRPC to help the community understand what's at stake, to help the community get a better sense of where there are opportunities for maybe light industrial or commercial growth, and what effect, consequences or otherwise, that will have if we were to move forward in that fashion. So again, I think that committee process is the best way to go. And there are a lot of different strategies to get to consensus. There's a lot of different strategies folks use, like a facilitative dialogue process that we've used when we had to get consensus on how we would develop our strategic plan. So we could draw from some of those strategies that at least give people the sense that their voice was heard, that it provided input. We may not be able to solve their problem, but at least we can say that it was an open and transparent process, right? And so your last part of your question was about the town manager's role in setting the tax rate?
Basically determining the tax bill, or what the extent of the relationship is between the town manager and the tax bill.
Again, and I think we have to understand what of our drivers. We have to understand what our costs are today, what our costs are going to be 5 years from today. And without that, we're just shooting the dark year after year. And so my role in all of this really is going to be doing that projection. So I think I mentioned earlier that I've already put my feelers out there with DLS, Division of Local Services, and they have models to do these 5-year financial projections and are willing to come down and support the town and helping us kind of walk through all that. And so so once we get through that process, we'll understand what our projected revenues and expenses are going to be, and then it's from that point we need to start making decisions. The only way forward, do we need economic development, or can we hold off for an additional 5 years? But again, not knowing what our projected revenues are going to be a problem. Now, I do know that you have a couple developments that are happening in the community, residential develops. And so there are some municipalities that don't like residential developments because the costs that are associated with providing all the municipal services when you bring families into town. Now, in some communities, municipalities are like those because it expands the tax base. And so those are some of the additional decisions that the town's going to have to think about, when they look at further permitting residential developments and what the constraints are going to be to the budget by doing so. So sometimes it's not always the best cost-benefit ratio that you may be looking for by residential expansion, and by knowing that, folks may be more apt to lean towards commercial or light industrial expansion.
Just a quick follow-up. And how will you adjust, or your management style adjust to our budget as compared to where you're working currently, dollars and cents wise?
Well, I think that, so I guess what you're saying is because it's a smaller budget, how do you adjust downward? But Tim Murray, who was the mayor of Worcester at one point, became the lieutenant governor, and they asked him the question, so I think his first month there, so how is it with this big budget? And he said, the only difference is there's more zeros at the end. That was his response. And so that's really the only difference. I mean, it's the process itself doesn't change. I mean, the bottom line may look differently, but the process is the same. And so, I think it comes down to, what we can afford. But that's all relative. What you can afford and what is needed are relative to one another. So you may have a larger budget, but you may require more services. Your infrastructure may require a larger portion of the budget. And so I'd like to believe that the ratio would be the same. And so therefore, having to, in this case, I'll say throttle back a little bit, the thought process still stays the same.
Thank you.
That concludes our questions. Traditionally, what we do at the end of this is give you an opportunity to do any recap or ask us any questions. Obviously, you've done some homework on the community, but you may have questions you want to ask us about the process, and this is your opportunity.
Thank you. Well, I think how I want to end is just by saying that, again, I've done some homework, and I think that my approach to leadership and management is very collaborative. I think it's really important to sit down with folks, have a conversation, understand their needs, and try to address them the best that you can. And that's really what I bring that's very different than maybe other candidates, is my approach to management and to leadership. A lot of the things that we do as managers is very technical. So whether you have more experience understanding the assessor's role or understanding the DPW's role, in my opinion, is probably less important, because that's all technical, and we can pick up where there may be some deficiencies, or we can lean on other folks where there's some deficiencies. I think that what you can't do, and I used to say this all the time when I used to hire folks, and I still do hire folks, is I can't teach people how to engage the community. I can't teach people to come to work on time. I can't teach people to be well organized. And that's something that I think I can bring to you all, that my organization skills, which probably have been strengthened by being in the military, my leadership skills, by in all the different places that I've worked, my broad array of experience that I've had over my 17-year municipal career, I think lends itself well to what you're doing. But in the end of all that, what I can bring is I have this open dialogue, I communicate with people, I care about what folks have to say, and I don't just blow them off. And in the end of all that, I also work for Mike O'Brien, who's a tenacious city manager. And so I don't look at this job as a 9-to-5 job. I look at this job as this is a job you come to work every day until you get the work done. So that's my approach. I would enjoy being here, 30 minutes from home versus my 90-mile commute today. So I thank you for the opportunity. I don't think I really have any questions. Alan has described the process moving forward already, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate Bob's time a few weeks back given to me, and so I thank you all for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. You've been very engaging. We appreciate you coming in. Wednesday, we are scheduled for an executive session. By then, at that point, we will have concluded amongst ourselves. We will go into the final debate, and we will work up a form of agreement for the candidate, along with MRI and present town manager. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to them. That would be preferable, but it's our anticipation to move this along. and there is the screening process that MRA has to do, the background, et cetera. But it's our intent, again, to get this going. So you will hear from us very shortly.
Great.
So,
Thank
okay?
you again.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want to hold on to those, or
Do you need them? Because if you need them more than we do, I think you've reinforced the point, unless somebody wants to see them.
Are they duplicates, or are they?
They're not duplicates, but you can have them, and I can get back and have it outside.
You gentlemen.
We'll leave them on the table, we'll get them back to you. How's that? Thank you very much. Okay, the board, we've concluded, well, 2.5 hours of solid discussion here, and I take that back, 3.5 hours of solid discussion. And we've been educated, if nothing else, that I want to compliment the screening committee. Some members are here. I want to compliment MRI. You brought some very good candidates forward, and this is our first exposure to them other than their background information. But I, for one, am certainly impressed at the quality of the individuals. Again, it's our intent to move forward. We can have a little discussion if you gentlemen want now, and do an overview. Again, we're cautioned what we can say about a candidate. We have to be careful not to in any way defame or discredit a candidate, but we're open to have some general dialogue if you wish. At your pleasure. Do you want to, or would you rather just?
Other than to restate what you've said, 3 excellent candidates there. It's going to be a difficult decision. That's all I can say.
It's going to be a difficult decision. It's going to
Okay.
a lot of
Well,
rereading.
the good thing is we have the rest of today and Tuesday to dig into this. And we do not have conflict by law, correct me if I'm wrong. If we should want further information, these gentlemen are available to us to give us backup. As long as we don't do it in consensus outside of a meeting, we're fine. And again, by Wednesday, we should be ready to go, is my estimation. So, and yes,
Will the decision be made public on Wednesday?
yes, yes. The reason for executive session, there are discussion issues relative to contractual that we're allowed to do in executive, but that's really the only reason. I would expect we would openly state who the candidate is. And that would come at the beginning of our meeting, because then we'll have all absorbed this. So we will be ready, as they say. So if there's nothing else, we prepared to adjourn this process?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second motion?
And that would be at 1:22. Thank you, and Glenn, thank you for your time today.